Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a special Ranting Monkey broadcast. With me, as always, is Scribe. Say hi, Scribe.
Hi, Scribe.
I cannot stress this enough. There's going to be spoilers in this discussion. If you haven't seen the movie or you're very sensitive to these kind of things, you don't want to watch this. Because I want this to be a discussion about the entire movie and all of the plot points that we liked or disliked.
Okay.
So what should we start with the trailers and the things that we're missing?
Well, let's start with. I think we should start with what our thoughts and expectations were before going in, and see how those align with the results. Okay, so because Monkey and I have already had a bit of a conversation about this on last night's stream and before, so I have a relatively good idea where he's at on these things, but. And we discussed this long before the movie came out, because just on the prospect of there being another Spider-Man movie, in the grand scheme of Spider-Man movies, I was always just happy that Spider-Man got a movie in the beginning, because I've been a Spider-Man fan since I was 3 years old. Mm-hmm. I collect the comic books left, right, and center for most of my teens. And like Monkey, my love for Spider-Man and my respect for Marvel kind of took a nosedive during the 90s when they decided to unleash the clone saga that never saw an end, apparently.
Such shit.
Yeah, sorry, I won't go. That is the clone saga is a whole other stream, but let's just say they decided to recycle a plot line from the 70s, and it turned into a never-ending just mishmash of bullshit.
Yeah.
Ruined the character, ruined the mythos of the character basically it redefined the entire run of the character for my entire life, basically. Yeah. And it just, anyway. So I'm a big fan of Spider-Man. I could always relate to him because I was the nerdy kid. I always wanted to be special. I always felt like an outcast, etc. But I knew there was more I was capable of when I was young. So when the Spider-Man movie started coming out, I was really happy just that there was a Spider-Man film, because they've been working on that for a long time. They finally got the rights figured out, and then Spider-Man came out.
Before, what did you think of the very first movie?
Well, I was about to say, the very first Spider-Man movie, like a lot of people with movies that involve their favorite sort of IP or whatever, I gave it a lot more of a pass on the basis that it was Spider-Man until, of course, years later and on reflection. I thought Willem Dafoe made a great villain. I thought their design of the Green Goblin as a Power Ranger was stupid.
That armor was bad. Just bad.
I thought Tobey Maguire in the first one was... I was willing to give it some, because Peter Parker had never been played on the big screen, and I'm not putting aside the 70s TV movies where you had whatever his name was, Hammond or whatever, playing Spider-Man in the TV movies, but still, this is a big budget movie, so I also gave him a little bit of leeway for the performance, because it was kind of a novel thing.
My only real problem with Tobey in the first movie was how soft-spoken he was.
Yeah,
he was playing a nerd doesn't mean you have to whisper everything you say.
Yeah, and like you're quiet and you're nervous about everything.
Yeah, you can still talk, and
the other thing that I didn't like about the first one, I remember in an interview hearing Sam Raimi's explanation for why he did this. I thought it was stupid, but what I didn't like was the naturally formed webbing. I didn't like that the webbing came from his body. It made no fucking sense. It also
took away one of the tropes of Spider-Man. He was constantly running out of his webbing.
Exactly, and that was part of his motivation for having a job and getting money, was to get the chemicals he needed to make the web fluid. That was part of the deal. I understand that by removing that, they take away a whole bunch of excess plot points they didn't want to dwell on, but you can just gloss over them after you've established them. They did that just fine in the Homecoming movie. I mean, there was a notion that he had a limited amount, but they didn't sit on it, but they made it part of the character all the same.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Sam Raimi's explanation was, well, it didn't make sense for us that some teenager could invent a substance that 3M can't come up with. And I'm like, you're having a guy fly around on a glider in a Power Rangers suit.
No.
Who gives a shit?
It doesn't make sense that he could come up with that, but it makes perfect sense he could get bit by a spider and get spider powers.
Yeah, and somehow create that costume in his bedroom. Yeah, anyway. So I was happy that there was a Spider-Man movie. On reflection, I wasn't that jazzed. Spider-Man 2, I was really happy with.
It.
Yeah, I don't love it, but I am in awe of in particular, the train fight sequence. The train fight sequence, that whole thing, even though it is a little bit cheesy and they lay on the "We Are New York" thing a little bit too much, taken by itself, if you hadn't seen the first movie as a standalone Spider-Man thing, the bank robbery and the fight were straight out of the comic books. His saving those people on a train, and it wasn't like he was saving the city from a giant blue light coming out of the ground. It was it was a train of people. It was relatively small stakes, and the people standing up for him against Dr. Octopus really worked for me, because in the comic books, New York was a character in and of itself.
Yes,
the culture of New York, Spider-Man's place therein, he being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, that really worked. And so Spider-Man 2 is, for me, probably the best Spider-Man film overall as a movie. But I still really like Homecoming as a Spider-Man movie, but we'll get to that. And Spider-Man 3 was trash. It just absolute
Spider-Man
garbage.
3 was trash. Now, you haven't seen either of the Amazing Spider-Man films, right?
No, I have not sat through them all. I've seen many sequences and scenes from them, yes.
I didn't have much of a problem with the Amazing Spider-Man. It's got some cheesy, you can tell Hollywood got their hands on it kind of shit.
Yeah.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is garbage. It's better than Spider-Man 3, which is not a very high bar to hit, but it is just garbage. Again, Peter is just, instead of being the soft-spoken nerd, he repeats himself constantly. If you've seen either of the Honest trailers, you see that. He just stops, and I guess I would like to do that. I would like to do that. Yeah, I would like to. He comes off more as autistic than, a nerd.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Homecoming, the newest one.
Sure.
Which overall I did not like, and you did, correct?
Overall, I did like it. And so when so in order to explain a couple of things about Homecoming, you have to understand a little bit about the licensing of the character, because unfortunately, the licensing of the character did play a large part in how they had to introduce the character. And I looked this up to make sure I was right on the timelines and stuff.
Yeah, and we had a little disagreement about that last night, and I want to cover that again tonight, or today. I absolutely agree, because of the licensing. Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man, and they gave it back to Marvel. Well, they didn't give it back. They let Marvel use it for Homecoming and for whatever the sequel's going to be. So absolutely, they had to introduce him in a way that's not congruent with the comics.
Right. So what happened was,
I understand that.
Oh, sorry. Well, really briefly for the people listening. So the agreement to allow Marvel Studios to make use of Spider-Man was finished in February of 2015. Now, production on Captain America: Civil War, the next Marvel movie to come out, was already in full tilt at that point. So they had the idea that, well, if we're going to start work on a Spider-Man movie and stay within the time constraints Marvel had to make that movie before the contract and everything else got complicated, they wanted to pre-introduce the character in Civil War in order to then set up for a Spider-Man movie that was then almost immediately in production. So the agreement was reached in February 2015, and the extra shooting for Captain America: Civil War concluded in August 2015. So they only had a few months in order to get Spider-Man into a film that was already in process and already pretty much almost all completed, because they had to have it done before the what was it, the summer of 2016 or whatever.
Right.
So what they did, how they chose to do it, I will never deny, is one of the most shoehorned and awkward ways in which they could have introduced Spider-Man into the whole situation. And I agree with Monkey. They had a whole raft of other options. But apparently they thought that the thing to do was to have Tony Stark do a, I don't know, sabbatical in the middle of the Civil War events to go recruit some kid he had seen on YouTube to come fight against Captain America and join the team out of the blue without much preamble, and have a scene of mentorship / stepfatherhood to establish that before he shows up. And when Spider-Man does show up in Civil War, his portion of the film, truth be told, was one of the highlights. The way they did him, his characterization, his interaction with the other characters, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, him in Civil War, Spider-Man, not Peter Parker. The Peter Parker issue was shit. But when he actually joins the fight in Civil War, he is so Spider-Man in that moment.
Yes.
He is goofy, having fun. That's what Spider-Man does when he has his costume on.
Yeah.
One of the things I always loved about the comic books is that when he was fighting, even if he thought he was against the odds, he was just a sarcastic, joking jackass the whole time.
Yes.
And that's exactly how he was in Civil War, which gave me so much hope for this movie until I saw the first trailer. Which is where you and I first started talking about Homecoming. And I said from then that I was predicting that this movie would be shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I went into this expecting the worst. And I will give them this on that. This is not the worst Spider-Man movie. It's definitely not my favorite, and I have a lot of problems with it. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but I still thought it was crap.
Okay, well, let's just dive into it. So the movie, and I've got the little summary in front of me here. The movie opens with a device to tell us where these events sit within the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so we open with Michael Keaton, who plays Adrian Toomes, who in the beginning of the film is the head of some salvage operation, some salvage company.
Yes.
And they've gained a contract from the city to clean up after the disasters that occurred in the Avengers film when the Chitauri invaded Earth. And so you've got this scene where I believe they're in Central Station or whatever with the giant monster ship thing, and they're like, stripping stuff down and packing it up. And we get to see a little bit of how this alien material is special and does things. So these events so the events of this film and the subsequent events are slipstreamed into previous events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All things considered, I thought that was fine. They did a fine job of just telling us, okay, how does this all fit together?
Plus, it's the first nerd reference. Damage Control was introduced.
Yes, that was funny. I was like, Damage Control is an official federal organization? That's hilarious.
That was awesome. I turned and went, that's a nerd. Oh, I turned to my wife and went, that's a nerd moment.
Now, did you notice that the head of Damage Control was Tyne Daly from Cagney and Lacey?
Yes.
I was like, Cagney and Lacey's here. This is perfect.
But that was one of those. They did that a few times throughout the film where there's just a little nerd reference, and it's like, oh, I love it.
Yes. They also established that Michael Keaton is at this stage, or Adrian Toomes at this stage in the story, is a sort of blue collar, hardworking guy who cares about his employees and cares about his family. Like, this is, I came for a job. You guys are kicking us out. We don't get paid for what we're doing. And, on the surface, it's like, well, this guy got screwed. By all rights, he just got screwed over by the man.
Yeah.
And this is a theme that will extend for the character and his group throughout the film. Some guy makes some snarky remark to him that, he should have planned ahead or something, and he punches him, and then everybody pulls guns, which honestly, in that situation, when a bunch of government stiffs come in and then they start pulling guns without having announced they were like FBI or something, then it's like, holy shit. He looks genuinely scared. Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And so that whole sequence, I thought, worked really well for establishing Adrian Toomes' attitude towards the situation, his motivation to try to get back some of his by using the alien stuff they had already collected. So that was fine by me. I didn't have a problem with that.
Here's the thing. I love the sequence. I really did. I thought it was really good. And it does give the character motivation. My only problem with that is that if you go back to the original Vulture, that's who he's supposed to be.
Yes.
His only motivation was he was a criminal. And like I said, I didn't mind it in this movie because I understand that's what Hollywood has to do. You have to give him a better motivation than just I'm a criminal and Spider-Man is going to beat me up.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that with every character. It's okay to have some characters who are just shitbags. Like the one character that I did enjoy in this, criminal-wise, was the original Shocker. Who they killed way too quick. By the way, guys, spoilers coming. I love that if you pay attention, you only get to see the very top of it, but the jacket that he's wearing is the Shocker outfit.
Yeah, it's got that little pleated or whatever cross stitching. Yeah.
The quilting, that's what it is.
Yeah, quilting. That's what. Yeah.
So you get to see that, and then he's immediately gone. But there's a moment right there at that point where, because Michael Keaton supposedly accidentally kills him, and he's so callous about it, so callous. It's like, oh, whoops. He supposedly picked up the wrong gun. He was going to use what's basically the gravity gun from Half-Life 2, but he accidentally disintegrates him instead. I thought that was a great misuse of the character. I get why they did it because they wanted to use the other guy as the Shocker, but why so quickly? You barely give us the introduction to him and then immediately kill him off. That really bothered me. And I know I jumped ahead in the story, but the whole character of Michael Keaton, I loved Michael Keaton in this movie. To me, he's the shining star of the film. But his character goes on such a schizophrenic change. Like in this point, you have the absolute callous killing of a man, doesn't even care that it happened. I mean, literally no care. He just picks up the weapon and gives it to the other guy. I guess you're Shocker now. But later on, we see him very caring.
Maybe we should back up a little bit and start going chronologically, just to make sure everybody's okay. So we have this scene where we set up where we are in the story of the MCU, and then we jump ahead 8 years. Yes. Which is kind of weird to me because I was like, okay, so the Vulture and his boys have been operating in some capacity for 8 years, and this is the first time they've ever run up against any opposition by anybody? That seems, 8 years is a long time. I was kind of like,
yeah, especially with as strong as these weapons are. They try to play it off with a line in the movie where Michael Keaton's like, we got to stay under the radar. You're selling weapons that give off a giant blue light when you shoot them.
Yeah. So what Vulture, we'll just call it who they are. So what Vulture and his boys do is they take the alien technology that they had already salvaged from the job prior to the government coming in, which also doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense because any government operation is going to clean that shit up, by the minutest detail.
Yeah.
But anyway, setting that aside. So in the Vulture's team, you have basically three main characters. You have the Vulture, Adrian Toomes. You have what counts as the Shocker. I don't remember they ever said his name in this, so I'm just going to call him Herman because that was the name of Herman Schultz was the name of the character in the comic books, even though it's Bokeem Woodbine. So Herman Schultz seems like kind of off, but I don't know. And then you had Phineas Mason, who was the Tinkerer. Now, they don't call him the Tinkerer in the movie, but he is Phineas Mason. The Tinkerer is, in the comic books, sort of the weapons supplier for a whole raft of supervillains. He's just sort of like the go-to guy that gets you your gadgets and things. Yes, and so and I believe he got away at the end of this movie. So hopefully he'll come back because, for what they had him do, I didn't mind him. He was kind of ineffectual and everything and kind of funny, but, he didn't do anything awful, I didn't think.
No, he was mostly there to push the end scene.
Yes. Yeah, he just set that up too. And to give an excuse as to why, who they had that was designing this stuff, because they had one mechanical genius there at least who was figuring these things out.
Yeah.
So after the scene where we establish all this stuff, we jump into explaining again how Peter Parker. We didn't have a retelling of his origin story. We had a retelling of his origin story insofar as introducing himself to the MCU by jumping back to the Civil War events.
When I talk to my son about it, it's like, at least you don't see Uncle Ben die again.
Yeah.
But it is still another origin story. We do have to sit through Spider-Man becoming Spider-Man again. It's not the same. We don't have to see the spider bite. The spider bite's only mentioned as he's talking to his friend Ned. To me, the whole next hour of the film, after the opening sequence, could have been cut entirely, just left on the cutting room floor. There is no reason for 90% of what we see there.
Mm-hmm.
Because we go through Peter's life. We see his friend Ned find out that he is Spider-Man. Ned's in his bedroom when he sneaks in his window one night, when Spider-Man sneaks back into his window. Mm-hmm. And I understand why they did that. They use Ned Leeds in this mostly as a vehicle to explain everything that's going on. There's way too much of those two talking about what's going on, about how Peter's supposedly in an internship with Stark Industries. That's why he keeps disappearing all the time. Mm-hmm. But mostly what we actually see is Peter sitting around begging for Tony Stark's attention, which really, really bothered me. Really fucking bothered me.
Well, he wanted to go on a mission. He was really, really wanting to get with the Avengers because he's as much of a fanboy of the Avengers and the whole concept of being a superhero with a bunch of like adult superheroes. Because, again, and so I have to preamble everything I'm about to say any further about the film, is that I look at this film and I give a lot of forgivenesses, let's say, to what the people making the movie had to work within that had been established by that one shoehorn scene in Civil War. Because that was done by one group of people and one set of writers, and this movie was done by another group of people and another set of writers. And there's a lot of world building for Spider-Man implied in that Civil War sequence in a different movie that they had to build off of, whether they liked it or not. Now, I don't know who thought what about the movie or anything else. I'm just saying that if I were in the situation of, okay, so Spider-Man already exists. He already knows Tony Stark. Aunt May already knows that Tony Stark is involved in her nephew's life. These are the pieces of the puzzle you have to work with. And then you have to build off of that. I give a lot of leeway to, some of the quibbles I might have to the fact that you had people having to come in at sort of the 11th hour and tack on a Spider-Man story because of the way the licensing worked and the setup worked in Civil War.
But see, in Civil War, there's nothing set up where he absolutely has to become an Avenger. He could have been. They do show a sequence where he's kind of running around fighting crime in the city.
Yes.
And he makes mistakes, which you're going to expect because they made Spider-Man fucking 15 years old.
That is also important. Monkey isn't a fan of this, and I can't say that I'm a fan of it either, but given that that's the way they went, there are some reasonable pitfalls to that.
See, they did not establish his age in Civil War. So they could have made him 16, 17. Okay. They could have made him a little bit older. They could have made this where Spider-Man was a little bit older, and he could have been fighting not necessarily super villains, but actual villains. A lot of Spider-Man's foes that he fought weren't super villains. They were just, people who had augmented arms. I'm not saying bring in Dr. Octopus. Bring in somebody that gives him something.
Octopus is a super villain. Augmented arms. Come on.
That's what makes him a supervillain.
Yes, but
it's what I mean by that is you're not fighting a Hulk-like character. You're not fighting somebody he's not fighting Spider-Man. He's not fighting Venom all the time. He's fighting people who, for whatever reason, are villains, but somebody that Spider-Man could have tackled without begging for the Avengers' help. Mm-hmm. If you go to, do you want to go over any of the high school scenes? Because I'm about to jump to where we start getting.
Well, let's so we have the smartphone footage retrospective of joining the Civil War fight and the interactions with Happy Hogan, who's Stark's assistant, and we're setting up that he's like, wow, I got invited to fight with the Avengers, and now they're not talking anymore. I'm just waiting for that next mission. Hey guys, look, I can be a superhero too. Even though you've already proved it by fighting against Captain America and kind of beating Winter Soldier and everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of logical inconsistencies with the events of Civil War and how they had to set this one up to make it sort of a coming-of-age movie. And this, I think, was the biggest problem with the way... Sorry, what?
You keep saying that they had to, because of the way it was set up. They had a lot more leeway with this movie than I think you're giving them credit for.
Well, it would depend on what kind of story they wanted to tell. I mean, they didn't do the origin story again, but they have to introduce this character into the Marvel Universe and still make it something that's appealing for general audiences. They decided to go with him being 15. I do agree that was a mistake, but I don't know. I mean, I admit I am giving a lot more apologies to some of this based on things, but this is the problem with what goes on behind the scenes in movies. When somebody hands you something and they say they want it to be this way, they want to be able to market it to the children, etc., and you have to act within these constraints.
Let me comment on that real quick. I know two people, some dumb American who we chat with every night, and my wife, who've seen this movie and have no knowledge of Spider-Man really at all. Both of them loved it.
Yes.
So in that respect, they did a very good job in attracting those people.
Right.
My problem is that they shit all over Spider-Man fans in order to do that. And I think they still could have told the story without it being so suck. They basically make Spider-Man a fool. Last night I compared him to the greatest American hero.
Yeah,
somebody who literally this is somebody who's already fought Captain America. He's fought the Winter Soldier and did very well in those fights. But suddenly he's a complete moron when it comes to his own powers.
Yeah.
I have a big problem with that. And like I said, I understand what you're saying about needing to introduce the character to people who don't know him.
Yeah. And you can't have him be a Mary Sue. This is the other problem too, is that if you have Spider-Man able to do everything like he's been a professional at this for years and years and years, which is what they did in Civil War. The way they introduced him fucks everything up if you're trying to make the character new and fresh for the MCU, because you're basically saying, oh, aside from this suit I'm giving you, you operate like a superhero who's been doing this for a decade and has professional, in the realm of superhero stuff, professional skills and abilities. And then we dumb you down again in order to have a coming-of-age story, this whole thing about having to prove yourself, having to learn from your mistakes, all ABC after-school lesson type good things that I mean, if the movie was taken by itself if you take out like the montage of prequel, and you just have the movie and if Civil War hadn't happened, if Tony Stark had come across Peter Parker as just a result of the YouTube thing alone and decided I need to make sure, because how can I back this up here? So the events of Civil War say superheroes are dangerous. They need to be registered. That was the whole plot of Civil War. Okay. So if you had the start of Spider-Man without that Civil War introduction, say Tony Stark comes across this YouTube video, says, this kid needs some guidance or else he's going to turn into another problem like we had in Civil War, then takes him in and says, hey, here, this will at least make me feel better about you swinging around instead of swinging around in a sweatsuit. And now just watch yourself. And then goes off. And then we have the movie. That would have been better overall than trying to say he's already an experienced superhero and now we're going to dumb him back down into a learning curve.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. I just don't think Civil War is as much of a problem for this movie as you do.
Okay. No. I think it set things up in a way that made everything else awkward. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I get that, but I still think they could have done things in this. Like I said, he's already fought Captain America. There's no reason to show him. There's one point where he accidentally stops somebody from getting into their own car. Okay, I can see somebody making that mistake. But we didn't really need to see that in this movie. Like I said, he's already fought major superheroes and they have him. So, okay, maybe you got to establish the character. Fine. Let's talk about the high school. Somebody brought this.
Back to the movie.
It was striking to me, the choices for casting in this. Peter's like the only white kid in his school. Which
there's a story from The Root I'll be reading tonight on the stream in regards to this. But yeah, go on.
Well, like Flash Thompson, I don't care that you made him a different color, but you've taken the captain of the football team, the guy who has tormented Peter his whole life, well, his whole school life.
Yep.
You turned him into a little nerdy kid.
Part of the debate team. I thought, oh my God, really? Everybody's part of the debate team. I understand the necessity of having a plot device to make these characters associate in some fashion, other than the classic, oh, we're just going to run into each other in the hallway kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the debate team, really? Flash Thompson? No.
I had a problem with Ned Leeds for the whole movie.
God,
you were absolutely right. The first couple of times he talks like, oh, that's funny. And then it's like, shut the fuck up. We get it.
Yeah, Ned Leeds is the sort of like wide-eyed, oh my God, I'm friends with Spider-Man. And I'm like, yeah, okay, legit. If you've got a 15-year-old kid that finds out that his best friend is also a superhero that fought with the Avengers, that would blow your mind. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But that is that kind of august, wide-eyed, hey, everybody, look at this kind of, okay, that lasts for about 5 minutes, and then it just doesn't shut up.
As they're walking down the halls, he's talking about it.
I know. I'm like, oh my God.
Nobody ever hears either.
No.
Apparently, everybody in Peter's school is deaf.
Yeah, they're deaf. Nobody knows what the grapevine is. Nobody can. You can't have a character like that operate the way he did, and also pretend like, oh, secret identities are a thing in this world. And I know you're going to talk about that at no length coming up, but
yes, we're going to get into that.
Yeah, the character of Ned Leeds, they needed to tone him down by about 17 degrees because, like I say, the oh my gosh attitude was good for the first 5 minutes. But as soon as it became apparent, honestly, as soon as Peter looked at him and said, dude, Aunt May can't know because of what she's going through. Now that is the moment, that is the sobering moment, because we all know what Aunt May's gone through. We all know in some fashion what, her situation is, if we're sticking to the comic book lore, which, whatever. Anyway, at that moment, that should be the moment at which Ned has a sort of, okay, I got to tone it down. And you could have moments where he was like chomping at the bit to say something or do something and then holding back. And you could do that and it would be fine. But he doesn't shut up the entire fucking movie. And I hated him.
I did. And Peter never had friends in school.
Not really.
I understand why they brought in Ned. Like I said, they use him as a vehicle to tell a lot of there's a lot of exposition for Ned. That's his sole purpose for being there.
Yeah.
One thing I did like was if we can jump this far ahead, the party scene.
Yes.
Because that did illustrate something that happens to Peter throughout his high school career.
Yes.
In the party scene, he has the chance to make himself popular.
Yep.
And he has to give that up because he has to go be Spider-Man. That part, I really love that because that is a throwback to the movie or to the comic books. So often in Peter's life, he's got this chance to do, be the popular kid for a minute. Mm-hmm. And something screws it up, almost always him having to go do Spider-Man stuff.
Yeah, so for reference, what happens is that Ned, the idiot, says, oh, Peter knows Spider-Man. And like, okay, there's no reason why this kid should know Spider-Man. In the comic books, it was like, okay, he's a photographer for the Daily Bugle. He takes photographs of stuff. He's running into Spider-Man in the city doing his job. That makes sense. In this instance, there's nothing. The kid doesn't do anything outside of school. Like, oh, the internship with Tony Stark, I met Spider-Man. Or something, I guess, maybe, but it's not nearly as clean-cut an idea. But even then, it's like, Ned, shut the fuck up. So now that he's established, oh, Peter Parker knows Spider-Man, Peter can like impress everybody by having Spider-Man show up at this party at Liz's house and show that, yeah, I know Peter Parker. He's my best friend. But not only does he struggle with the idea of using his alter ego to get popular artificially, which I really appreciate, like you say, that's good Peter Parker stuff from the old days. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, as he's getting ready and literally sitting on the edge of the building, deciding whether or not to do this, something else comes up that takes him completely away from the party and destroys any chance he had, even just as Peter Parker, to mac on Liz. And so that whole, yeah, you're right. That whole party scene, that whole interaction, that worked really well overall as a Spider-Man vignette.
Oh, we do need to talk about Betty Brant too.
No, do you mean Liz or Betty Brant?
Betty Brant. Because I asked you if she was
5 minutes. Yeah.
Was she? I hated what they did with her. They should have just left her out completely. Because what they ended up doing.
There's a lot of these characters they should have left out completely. They did nothing.
Betty Brant in the mythos of Spider-Man isn't a really major character. It was his first love, but they never got a real date. Something always came up, and then her brother had issues. Anyway, she was a good character in the comic books, but I don't think she would translate well very much to the movies. But they just threw that name up there with some little blonde girl doing school news. Yeah, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? No, he meets her when he goes to work for the Bugle. She's Joan's secretary, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, a Betty Brant type character type dynamic, that would work if you were doing this as like a Netflix series. Like if you had some kind of like social, personal drama time or some office politics kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as a movie concerned, yeah, I mean, most of the kids in this movie that are his friends or on the debate team are disposable characters. And I don't mean like, oh, kill them off. I mean, they add nothing to the film. And for what they do, it's not even worth the screen time to have them there for even plot movement.
Right. And with Betty, I get it. They were throwing that up there for those of us who know who the fuck she is.
Yes.
But for those of us who know who she is, that's a slap in the face. That's a slap in the face. That was not the nerd moment that Damage Control was. That was, what the fuck are you doing?
As useless as the character was for having her there, it didn't bug me. I didn't feel like, oh, this is insulting my intelligence or something. It's just like,
it did me.
Okay. I mean, there's this cast of supporting characters in the Spider-Man mythos in high school, and yeah, it was a little bit of lip service, fan service for the sake of for no payoff. I mean, there's no payoff to it at all. No. But there it is, and it's part of the lore. It's part of the history. Here's a nod to that, and maybe she will be a bigger character in the sequel or something. I don't know. I mean, the other thing that I always tend to forget, which is weird given how exposed I am to this stuff now, is that the smart writers plant seeds they can pull off later on in other films because they're almost all expected to be trilogies or series now. So sure. I do appreciate where they take the time to introduce a character that will pay off in his small presence in movie 1 by movie 2, which they do with an upcoming villain, which we'll get to later, which I appreciated. But it also goes for the supporting characters. So I didn't feel offended by that. I felt offended by a particular character at the end of the movie.
Oh,
but we will get to that. We will get to that at length. Anyway,
speaking of characters that offend you, there's one girl throughout the movie. Yeah. And the first time you run into her is, you see it in the trailer. Spider-Man is sitting there with Ned, and they're talking about Liz's new top.
It's just weird.
Oh, God, it's so creepy.
It's really weird.
There's this snarky bitch at the end of the table who tells them they're both losers. And she pops up throughout the movie, literally for no fucking reason.
Yes, for no reason at all. And we'll get to the best quote-unquote part of her prior to the end of the movie in Washington, D.C., which I just like, ugh. Let's see. Let me get back to the thing here. So we get the Parker quits Midtown School of Science and Technology academic decathlon. Okay, so there's this. So Parker is on the academic decathlon team along with Ned and Michelle and Betty Brant and Flash Thompson and all these other characters and a couple that we don't even know. And this is part of the decathlon team keeps these characters having to interact with each other as a matter of course and not just through high school. It also is the vehicle by which we get Peter Parker to Washington, D.C., which is a plot point. Yeah, go ahead.
He has to go to Washington, D.C. because he gets a tracker on one of the bad guys who's selling the guns, the mega weapons that have been made from the stash that Michael Keaton had saved that he didn't get back to the government. And he tracks them all the way back to D.C., so he has to go there. And as you were saying, the debate team has to go to national debate. So, yes, he comes back to the debate team after having just quit it.
Right.
Which I had a problem with that, too, because he comes back as they're at the bus.
Right. Like, oh, by the way, I'm just here again. The teacher's like, okay, let's get on the bus. Like,
yeah, that part was so fucking stupid. But okay, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And
no, it's fine. Yeah, so from there, so we go to D.C. Yeah, so Peter Parker tries to go to this party. He has a big struggle over whether or not to show himself off as Spider-Man and prove how cool Peter Parker is. Right then, there's this big blue explosion off in the distance, which apparently only Spider-Man notices. But anyway, So he swings over to see it, and what we see is a arms deal going down between Herman Schultz, who I looked it up. Apparently, Bokeem Woodbine plays Herman Schultz. So that character actually represents the character that is the Shocker in the comic books, whereas the other character is someone called Jackson Bryce, who is a character in the Marvel universe, but he's just like apparently just like a thug. He's just a guy. So it doesn't make any sense for the sake of continuity in this movie to the comic books. But anyway, so he wasn't the Shocker. The Shocker, as we know him, the character, is Bokeem Woodbine. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't solve anything anyway. So those two guys are selling guns or trying to sell super guns to some character called Aaron Davis, who's played by Glover? What's his name? The guy who's going to play Lando Calrissian in the Han Solo movie. This character just wants like a gun, but they're trying to sell him like super guns. And I'm like, these guys have been operating for 8 years and they're trying to sell super guns to like low level criminals,
to a common thug, yeah,
to a common thief kind of guy. It's like, okay. So anyway, Spider-Man sees this weapons deal going down, and he stops it, and he tries to chase the van with the two guys in it as they're shooting at him with super guns throughout residential Brooklyn or whatever, or Queens. And at the last minute, he gets a tag, a little spider tracer on one of them. And then we lead up to, I got to get back on the decathlon because they're going to DC, and I need an excuse to go to DC. So now we'll go. And he never gets to the decathlon, of course, because he's doing Spider-Man stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, so they end up going to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the timeline here. Does the Washington part happen before he ends up trapped?
No, so what happens is that he goes to Washington. He has this big fight where he discovers that what Adrian Toomes is doing is that he is hijacking government shipments of this material and any super stuff. I mean, they've kind of graduated from just the stuff that was recovered in New York to stuff that is being left over from anything damage control deals with. So anything, whenever there's some super material fallout from this movie or that movie, and there's something to be salvaged, they try to steal it. Yes. And so setting that up alongside the events of all the movies previous to this, you could kind of say, okay, well, if he's been doing this parallel to every Marvel movie that's taken place in and around New York since Avengers, then yeah, they probably have stuff from Ant-Man. They probably have stuff from all the Captain America stuff. I mean, the super carriers crashing and Captain America, Winter Soldier, all this stuff. So it's like, okay, that's kind of cool if they've been operating on the fringe, cleaning up, like picking off the leftovers of damage control's operations since Avengers. I'm like, okay. And that's what makes him the Vulture. Anyway, so they're trying to hijack a shipment of materials, the government is. Spider-Man fights them. One of the gadgets they have from their things is something that makes a portal that can go through solid matter, so you can like jump through a wall without breaking the wall. Spider-Man has a fight with the Vulture on this truck. He falls inside the truck. He gets trapped, and then he wakes up in the storage facility somewhere while the decathlon's going on. And then he spends like 15 minutes or something, as far as movie time, trying to get out of this cell that he's locked in.
We need to talk about this part because this part really bothered me. This is where he finds out his suit talks to him.
Yes.
And suddenly the Spider-Man suit is like the Iron Man suit. It can do everything except open a door.
Right. It can't crack the lock or hack it for him or anything else. No.
Until later when it actually does it.
Right. The other thing, too, that we learn in this that is important for the events that are upcoming is that the power source of these weapons, if exposed to additional outside radiation, become explosive, like uncontainable explosive. And so what happens is then when we learn that, we see Ned, who has taken the power source from a weapon that was left over after Spider-Man's van chase through Queens Residential. He put it in his backpack to take it with him to D.C., I forget what the logic was behind that, except they didn't want to leave it behind and have it be tracked.
Peter told him to do it because if there was a part in the high school where they'd taken it to the high school, and the bad guys had tracked it down. They were tracking the energy source. So Peter wanted it to keep it with him to keep it safe. And he told, when he left the hotel, he told Ned not to let it out of his sight. That's why Ned.
Yeah, and since Peter didn't show up to go back to the decathlon, Ned just took it with him because that. And then he puts his bag through the X-ray machine to go to the decathlon, and the X-ray machine sets off the chain reaction that makes this thing volatile. So then, after Peter escapes from the storage facility, the decathlon people, having, I guess, already won the decathlon, go to the Washington Monument. And while in the elevator in the Washington Monument, in Ned's backpack, the thing goes nuclear and sets off an explosion that energy beams damage the elevator. And now they're 3/4 of the way up inside the Washington Monument, and the elevator's about to fall. And this is where Spider-Man finally shows up to try to save the day in a very legitimately difficult scenario to try to get through not only the Washington Monument, but save people inside of an elevator. Prior to this...
We had a super chat. It says Glover's character is Miles Morales' uncle. For those of you who don't know, Miles Morales eventually becomes a Spider-Man.
A Spider-Man, yes, in a different universe, which I'm pretty sure they will find a way to make part of this universe for the sake of things.
Oh, yeah.
But now before this, there is the classic scene, and I say classic because it was so out of place, where our dour, snarky student, Michelle, is standing there with the teacher looking up at the Washington Monument, and the teacher's like, hey, Michelle, you want to go up in the Washington Monument with everybody? And she looks at him, and she says, and this is a 15-year-old, she says, I'd rather not celebrate something that was built by slaves.
Yeah.
And I'm like, go fuck yourself, movie. I did not come here for social justice commentary. There are sprinklings of this kind of stuff in the movies. Most of it is like background pictures and things or little suggestions of stuff and la la la. But this character in particular, like, oh, go fuck yourself. Why are you even here? What was that for? What did that do for the movie? What the hell? It
was such a stupid moment in the movie. There was no need for it at all. None. No. Other than to show this snarky bitch being a social justice warrior.
Oh, they say Donald Glover is the Prowler. Oh, is that who Aaron Davis is? Let me double check that because... Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, that's right. The Prowler. Okay, so I don't know if he'll become the Prowler, but yeah, the Prowler is a vigilante superhero in the Marvel Comics that is in the Spider-Man realm of things. He's sort of a... he doesn't have superpowers. He just has a whole bunch of gadgets and stuff. They didn't really establish this guy as a mechanically inclined gadget guy, but who knows?
It's another one of those characters where they just throw a name out there. And maybe he'll be used later, but for now, they just threw a fucking name out there.
Anyway, so Spider-Man then has to climb up the side of the Washington Monument after this explosion has happened. Like police/military helicopters show up real fast, but then it is Washington, D.C., terrorism stuff. So, okay. And they see Spider-Man and they think that maybe he's the threat or he caused this while he's trying to save people. He breaks into the Washington Monument. He is able to use his webbing and save the elevator, and specifically, for the sake of plot, save Liz. And then he gets out of that and he's fine, mostly.
For the record, I really like that scene.
Yes.
Especially if we have Spider-Man when he's new, because Spider-Man 10 years from then would be able to web it all up to where it was never going to fall and just pick everybody out. So for a new Spider-Man having to struggle, because it fell more times than it should have. But I really did like that scene for that reason. So I will give him credit on that one.
Yeah, they're like I said, there are certain vignettes in this movie that are pure Spider-Man. The party scene, a couple of the rescue scenes, even most of the fight scenes, I didn't have a problem with. But
my problem with the Spider-Man parts of it were mostly where you could tell it was CGI crap.
Okay.
Some of his jumps and stuff, like, come on.
Yeah.
We've advanced to a place where you can do good looking CGI, and that just wasn't it.
All right. So after he saves Liz and everything, the class returns to New York. And Peter's like, okay, I gotta put a stop to this. I gotta end this stuff now. This is dangerous. These weapons, the weapons are dangerous on their own, but now they can turn into like nuclear bombs. How am I going to do this? And with the help of his talking suit, he figures out, well, the only person that I know of that could maybe tell me where these guys are is the guy they were trying to sell guns to earlier. So he tracks down Aaron Davis. And there's this, I'm still, honestly, to this point, I'm kind of debating. So what happens is that Spider-Man tracks Aaron Davis down somehow, I don't know how he did it, but to a parking garage. And they have this interaction where Spider-Man, a 15-year-old kid, for the sake of the movie, tries to interrogate/intimidate this guy because the suit has engaged interrogation protocols, and now his voice sounds like Batman.
Yes.
And so I really did appreciate the fact that it was a sideways. I think it was a sideways nudge into the silliness of Christian Bale's Batman voice in the Batman movies, which I did find hilarious as I was watching it because it was like, "Tell me where he is." Like, I was just like, "Oh, that's hilarious." But it shows, but Aaron Davis is just standing there, even though his hand is now webbed to the trunk of his car. He's standing there going like, "I'm not impressed, and you're not scaring me." And he's like, "Come on, man." I mean, and so I'm still debating, like, is that awkwardness of trying to, like, this is the first time he's trying to, like, intimidate somebody as a superhero kind of thing when he's Spider-Man and he's generally not, I mean, he's intimidating in battle. He's not really an intimidating guy. Did that scene work? I'm still on the fence as to whether that scene works.
I don't have a problem with that part of the scene. I have a problem with him finally just giving up the information for no reason.
Yeah.
You're not intimidated by this. He's still a thug. He's somebody who robs people at gunpoint. And yeah, Spider-Man, here you go. Here's the information you wanted. That was, to me, just...
If he had said something like, so if we've established this guy is the uncle of the kid that eventually becomes the other Spider-Man, if like Spider-Man was giving up and walking away, and if the guy then said, "Look, okay, I'll tell you this only because my nephew is a really big fan of yours."
Yeah.
If he'd done something like that, if there was some instigating thing that just like, okay, I know I'm an asshole, but I understand this guy's not trying to hurt anybody. And that, you know, and of course, there was a little bit about this guy. It's like, okay, he was going to be sold super weapons, but he's like, dude, I just want a gun.
Right.
So there's a certain implication that his ambitions are not to be a weapon of mass destruction, even if he is just a criminal, quote unquote. So there's some sense of honor or proportion to this character already established. If he had said something like, "I'm an asshole," yeah, I'm an asshole, but I understand you're a good guy. So
I would have even understood it if it's like, "Look, man, those weapons are horrible. Yeah, you need to get them out of here."
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't. It was just like, okay,
no.
Here you go.
Yeah, exactly. That was dumb.
Yeah, that was dumb. I did appreciate the part where Peter tried to interrogate him and fucked it up.
Yes.
That was cute, and I know, like, my wife enjoyed it, but yeah, the him just suddenly giving it up for no reason was stupid.
And how he would know exactly where they were going to be that day, or what? Is weird,
that's
whatever. Okay, but anyway, so Spider-Man finds out that there's this arms deal that's going to take place on the Staten Island Ferry, which has got to be one of the most awkward places to do an arms deal. But hey, I guess it makes dramatic imagery. So Toombs is on the Staten Island Ferry, and he's masterminding from up in the passenger section with a laptop. The deal going down between his group and a known killer.
Before we go on, Michael in chat just said he actually says my nephew lives in the area, which is why he helps Peter. You're right. I do remember.
Oh, okay. All right. Legit.
Still not. Okay.
It's really it's minor. It's better than nothing. Okay. So anyway, they're on the Staten Island Ferry where the Vulture's group is about to sell a bunch of weapons to a known vicious killer named Max Gargan. And Max Gargan, for those nerds out there, is the Scorpion. He even has a scorpion tattoo on his neck. They never make a bigger deal about it, except lingering on that a little bit, which is fine. I was fine with that. I didn't have a problem. And they also hired, God, I forget his name, but he's the guy who played Voss in Far Cry 3. And if you've seen the promo footage for Far Cry 3, the little extra videos, if you've seen the character in the game of Far Cry 3, he is an excellent actor. He was in Better Call Saul. Yeah. He's great. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to be the Scorpion. And of course, he's the setup for hopefully the next movie, because we don't see him get all scorpioned out in this one. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen there. But they set him up. Spider-Man tries to stop this deal. Turns out it was a sting operation. Turns out that he had been monitored, or the whole thing had been monitored by the feds the entire time. Spider-Man didn't know that because he went off without checking in first or something by Tony Stark.
This is part of the problem I have with this, with a lot of this movie. Is once Spider-Man finds out that this is going on, he immediately calls Tony Stark, and he finds out about these weapons. And instead of Tony Stark going, "Hey kid, I got this," he just leaves him hanging.
Right.
So this precocious 15-year-old kid goes out to do his own thing to try to stop it because he wants to be a hero.
Right.
And
that was dumb.
Yeah, and the FBI somehow found out about the weapons, and with just regular guns, they were going to stop it.
Right.
Like, are you fucking kidding me? That makes no goddamn sense. So this is the scene that you guys saw in the trailer.
Yes.
Spider-Man shows up, starts beating people up, and Michael Keaton dons his Vulture outfit, and they fight over a gun, which eventually cuts the ship in half.
Yep.
And Spider-Man's trying to hold it up, and
somehow nobody dies from that happening. Nobody.
Yeah.
We find out that nobody died, but I'm like, okay, a giant explosive laser beam just sliced a ferry in two, and nobody happened to be standing anywhere near the slice point the entire time. Okay, all right, fine.
Luckily, nobody was standing in the middle of the ship. That's
yeah.
But that's then Iron Man comes in, saves the day, and takes the suit away from Peter.
Yes.
Because that's the problem. The suit was the problem. Now, I had a problem when we first started talking about this, and I saw the trailer, and Tony says to him, "I'm taking the suit back," and Peter goes, "I'm nothing without the suit." I'm like, no, that's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man spent the majority of his career, still at this point, the majority of his career, with just his regular suit. It was spandex. So the Spider-Man character never needed a super suit.
He's only been... So here's the thing, though, and this is another thing we got to remember, is if I remember correctly, prior to Civil War, he'd only been doing this for like 6 months. Right. This is like right after he got his powers, so he is a complete baby at this stuff. And again, I know I am giving slack to the writers and everything, but I'm trying to give the credit to, okay, given the circumstances we're presented, him not knowing what to do, him being uncertain of his own abilities and being self-conscious and not having confidence in everything else, and being 15, it makes some sense. I'm not jazzed with how they executed it.
I'm going to disagree with you. Hang on.
Okay.
In that part,
yes.
At this moment, so far that suit has never done anything good for him. He every time he tries to use it, it screws up. It's shooting the wrong webs that he wants. Even he's got 500 and some combinations, and he never figures out how to use that suit. But suddenly that suit is the most important thing in the world to him. Mm-hmm. That I get him wanting the high tech stuff, but at that point, the suit had never really worked for him. Mm-hmm. It had always screwed up. And so for him to be like, "Oh, I'm nothing without that suit," makes no goddamn sense. At that point, I'm like, take this shit. I keep fucking it up. And for him to be, "I'm nothing without the suit," that part just made no sense to me. And it's because at this point, he's still never figured out how to use it. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you go back to the interrogation scene, that didn't work out for him. Stuck in the vault with all the pieces from Alien stuff. Couldn't help him there. It just gave him time to talk. Mm-hmm. So that scene to me seems so out of place. And Tony coming in and wanting it back, I get that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But his proclamation, "I'm nothing without this suit," doesn't fit what has happened so far.
You're right. I won't disagree. You are right. Because if there had been something like, if we'd had some kind of situation where Spider-Man was operating before the suit, or even before he unlocked the extra features of the suit that he couldn't do, that he could then do because he undid that, and then life was easy for him. Like if we'd had a situation where he had to like hack something before he unlocked the suit and he couldn't do it, and then he could do it because the suit was. If there'd been some kind of disparity between not being able to do something cool and then being able to do something that saved his life or did something else or made life easier, then sure. I mean, the parts where he was able to track people down and have access to a whole bunch of database of information and everything else kind of lent itself to that idea, but it wasn't leaned on enough to make it the point where you say he's nothing without the suit. Yeah,
right. Yeah,
you're right. I agree.
So, and I hated that scene before I saw that, but after I saw it, I'm like, that just makes no sense at this point in the movie. So that really bothered me.
In the trailer, before knowing all the context, in the trailer, I got the idea they were going for. They were going for trying to have this sort of like, prove yourself, coming of age kind of thing. Oh, and by the way, at a point earlier in the movie, they really want to hit you over the head with the idea that this is the John Hughes Spider-Man movie by putting in a picture, or putting in a sequence of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where Ferris is running through the yards at the same time that Spider-Man is running through the yards. Here's a tip. Never, ever, ever put a better movie in your movie.
Yes.
Don't do that. It is one of the oldest tips of all things. A movie poster, a clip. Do not put a better movie in your movie, or because basically what you're saying is I'm on par with or better than the movie I'm presenting. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. No, Spider-Man: Homecoming is no Ferris Bueller. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so he gets the suit taken away from him. Tony's all mad at him. The notion is that now he's got to sort of solve his problems without the suit. He's all dumb, or it's not dumb. He's sad. He's depressed and everything. But he's got to go to the homecoming dance, the homecoming dance, and he got up the nerve to ask Liz. Sorry, go ahead.
This is the part I'm gonna spoil. This part. The 15-year-old asks out the senior, the popular, beautiful senior that everybody loves, who for some reason is already crushing on Peter. You can tell that throughout the whole movie for no fucking reason. There's nothing special about it. He's an awkward doofus, and for some reason, the senior chick loves him, and he asks her out, and she says yes. Like, where does that happen in real life or even in comic books? That's where you get laughed at. But for the sake of the movie, they went to the homecoming dance. Okay. And this is the big twist in the movie, guys. So once again, if you don't want spoilers, plug your ears right now.
Yeah, big spoiler alert. I mean, I got to admit, even because so when he gets on his suit and he gets the corsage and goes to the door, honestly, as I was sitting in the theater, I thought, wouldn't this be great if this was leading up to one of those dream sequences where he wakes up from a nightmare, he opens the door and suddenly the Vulture in full costume is there standing and grabs him and they suddenly wakes up. I thought that was what was going to happen, sort of in the back of my mind. And it did, sort of, because we find out that the family that Adrian Toomes has been doing all this work for and everything else the whole time is Liz's family. Liz is his daughter. He's the dad. Which
pissed me off on so many levels.
Okay, it didn't piss me off. I kind of liked it. I kind of liked that they brought it together. I mean, yes, it's awfully convenient. I know it's Hollywood bullshit, but for the sake of the story, it made some sense, and it also explained several things.
We talked about this the other night when we were talking about how villains in these kind of movies all have some altruistic motive. We get through the whole thing. He's doing this for his family. Great. I have no problem with that, because he's at the beginning, he's a hardworking blue collar guy who's just trying to, get by. And then they throw in Liz Allen, the Mexican kid, is suddenly his daughter, which does not happen anywhere in the Spider universe.
That doesn't make sense
before this.
Yeah, no.
Lots of people have mentioned, that was a really surprising part, and it surprised me too, because it never should have fucking happened. Never should have happened. I get why they did it. Yeah, you're right. It's Hollywood bullshit, but
they needed to be able to tie this whole thing together. They needed to be able to tie it together.
However, it did lead to the best part of the movie, and you were absolutely right about this.
Yeah, so Peter walks in. So at this point, Adrian Toomes, the Vulture, believes that his secret life is a secret. This kid shows up, and at this stage of the game, Peter Parker knows exactly who Adrian Toomes is. Adrian Toomes has no idea who this kid is in relation to things yet. So they're in this house, and Peter's acting, and credit where credit is due, the kid is acting like a 15-year-old kid would. He's not smooth and suave standing in front of the guy who just tried to kill him and did a whole bunch of other horrible things and tried to kill a bunch of people on a ferry. He's nervous as fuck and just like scared out of his mind. And
which they did. You're absolutely right. They played that very well, because it's how a 15-year-old kid would be meeting his dates dad.
That too, yes.
So it played very well because, yeah, Peter knows who he is. So Peter's like, holy shit, this is the Vulture. But the way it comes off in the scene, it's like, oh my God, this is her dad. So that worked very well. It really did.
I will say, so from that point onward, so the moment that door opens and we see that the Vulture is Liz's dad, everything through this is where the movie really got cooking for me. This is where sort of, if you'd started the movie with this somehow, this would be a great movie, because the tension that starts as soon as that door opens throughout the next like 20 minutes and even through the end of the movie is excellent. I thought it was great. Anyway, so they have this little pre-date thing, and he's like, "Oh, I'll drive him. I'll drive him to the homecoming dance." Oh, okay. And Peter's like, "No, it's okay. No, really. It's okay. I gotta do the dad thing." So they're driving along, and they start talking about stuff, and Liz is in the back, sort of, crushing on Spider-Man and all this other things, and they start talking about, how Peter's intern with Tony Stark, and Toombs is like, "Oh, well, really? Wow, what you do for them?" "Oh, just stuff." And there's this,
he knows Spider-Man,
and so there's this moment. There is this very brief moment where the camera is, it's got Michael Keaton's face in the foreground. You see the two kids in the back, and you see the gears turning in Michael Keaton's eyes as all these different things put together about this kid, how he's acting, the things he's saying. And you can see that he's solving the problem of who this kid is right there. Now, you have a problem with people figuring out who Spider-Man is. All things considered, and given these two characters' relationship, setting aside Ned, setting aside Aunt May, and everything else, this to me made sense. This made sense, all things considered, in this isolated moment. Him figuring it out made sense, or at least having a real good suspicion.
Okay, for the movie, I will give you that. For the movie, yes,
and it made sense. The voice, because it's like, haven't we met? Because your voice sounds really familiar. And
yes.
He doesn't disguise his voice, so it's like, well...
At this point, it makes absolute sense that he figured that out.
Yes.
My problem is, and this is my problem with so many Spider-Man movies, well, one of my problems with them, Spider-Man gets discovered by everybody. He might as well not even be wearing a fucking mask. In the comic books, nobody finds out who he is. There's very few people who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man. One of the reasons Venom is such a threat to Spider-Man is that he knows who he is. And he does things like show up at the house to talk to Mary Jane, or shows up to talk to Aunt May. He actually kidnapped Aunt May at one point. That's what made him such a terrible character, what made him so fearsome. Most of the others, they all want to know who Spider-Man is, but nobody ever finds out, except in the movies when suddenly everybody knows who the fuck he is.
Well,
he might as well be wearing a Peter Parker mask.
Yeah, the worst one, the worst offender of these is Tony Stark having figured it out.
Yes.
Watch a couple of YouTube videos. Yeah, but a couple of YouTube videos have figured it out. I mean, every other character who figures out Spider-Man is who he is in this movie, it makes sense. I mean, he drops down in costume in front of Ned. He got the costume on in front. I'm not saying I'm happy about it. I'm just saying that as far as they're discovering it, it makes sense. It's not a dumb reason to figure it out.
I get what you're saying, and within the context of the movie, sure. But that's also going by the notion that Peter's not very he's not particularly good at hiding his identity. Yeah. He might as well, like I say, just take off the mask at that point.
Yeah.
Speaking of the mask, I want to say, the scene where they show him sitting, eating with his mask up, it actually should have been over his nose. But that was cool because you don't see that. The only other time we've seen that in a Spider-Man movie is when he's hanging upside down and Mary Jane kissed him in, I think it was the first one.
I believe so, yes.
But you never see that. And in the comic books, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Peter constantly has his mask up over his nose so that he can talk or eat.
Yeah, he's like hanging on the side of the wall eating a hot dog he just bought from the guy down on the street kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's awesome because that scene was so Peter Parker, so Spider-Man that's another one I got to give him credit for.
The what would have been better is if we'd had a shot of like a guy with a hot dog stand, and then a web comes down, grabs a hot dog, and then another little web ball comes down with $5 and smacks down on the hot dog stand, and then you cut to Spider-Man eating the hot dog on the side of a building.
Yeah.
That would have been totally classic. Spider-Man and totally classic New York. Okay, so anyway,
but him sitting on the fire escape doing that I really love because if it was me, that would have been on my posters. That would have been on my trailers.
Yeah, that is iconic. So we're in the car, and Adrian Toomes figures out through legit, a process of elimination that. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so
in the movie,
by the voice, by where the kid was, by his nervousness, all these things put together, Stark's involvement, etc. All these things put together, Adrian Toomes is pretty sure he is who he is. So then they get to the school. He says, "Hey, Liz, go on in. I got to have the dad talk with him." Da, 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 da. And at this point, I'm like, this is as sinister a scene in a Marvel movie as I have seen to this point. And it's just inside of a car. All credit to the writers, the actors, the director, the entire 9 yards. The entire sequence from opening the door with Adrian Toomes to getting to the high school was excellent. Absolutely excellent. So anyway, Liz gets out.
The car ride was just brutal.
Tense,
to watch. It was
tense as fuck.
Awesome.
Yes, it was great. And it was one of those things where it's like, I could see this happening in a Spider-Man comic book. I really could. Now, here's the thing you have to remember, though. They have transposed certain elements of a different Spider-Man villain into this character in this movie. And what it is that they have taken the elements of Norman Osborn, being the father of a friend of Peter's, who is also Peter's nemesis. Because in this movie, the Vulture is Spider-Man's first real nemesis.
Yes.
So, and there's even elements, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, of Green Goblin. So Adrian Toomes confronts Spider-Man with, "Does she know?" And when the kid doesn't react with a "what are you talking about" kind of thing, it kind of confirms. I was pretty sure that for the sake of the characterization, Toomes was 95% sure this kid was Spider-Man, but wasn't sure until he asked him the question and didn't get the response he thought he should have gotten from a 15-year-old kid. And so as soon as that goes on, he's like, okay, here's the thing. If you try to stop me again, I'm going to kill you and everybody you love. And he's threatening as fuck. And it's really great. And he's sitting there with a gun in his hand, and it's awesome. The kid gets out. He goes to the dance, absolutely in a daze of fear and tension. Thank you, Peter. It's the Peter. The Peter has donated to you.
Oh, I will. I'm sorry. I'm on another screen. I'll be right there too.
That's fine. So,
thank you, Peter. Yeah. No message. I appreciate that.
So Peter goes into the dance. He looks at Liz, who is, of course, for the sake of the teenage drama stuff, she's absolutely radiant. He can have the dance with her. It's basically sort of that thing like, do I choose the normal life where I get all of the things that I want, but I let the bad guy go? Or do I do what a hero should do and, put caution to the wind and do the right thing? And I appreciated all of that.
Which again was another great Spider-Man moment. Yes. This is another great Peter Parker moment. He has the chance to get what he wants as Peter, and he just can't do it because of what Spider-Man needs to go do. That was such a great scene.
Yes. So he runs out.
I think this movie is shit, but there are some great points in it.
Yes, there are some great points. I don't think the movie's shit. Anyway, we've been over that. So then he knows he's got to fight. He's got to fight the Vulture. He doesn't have the super suit anymore. So he runs. He grabs his spare suit and web fluid stuff that he's got hidden in the school, and that little hiding place where he can lift up the locker bay, and he's got all the stuff under there. I kind of like that. Awesome. I was like that's cool. Yeah, the thing that I didn't understand about his regular costume is how the eyes still dilated when they're just goggles.
Yeah, that bothered me too.
Yeah, I was like,
he's not smart enough to make an actual Spider-Man suit, but he can make the goggles.
That part. I think they had to have added that in post somehow to keep up the sort of emotion. They didn't need to do that, as far as I'm concerned. That's where acting and emoting in your voice is more important than what the eyes of the suit are doing. But anyway, so he puts on the Spider-Man costume and he runs out to try to stop the Vulture. But the Vulture, knowing the kid probably wouldn't give up the ghost, I guess, and somehow having time to notify his henchman, the Shocker, Herman Schultz, is there in the parking lot with his Shocker gun, and he and Spider-Man have a fight amongst the school buses.
Yes, which nobody hears.
Yeah, nobody hears somehow, and only Ned kind of shows up to, at the last minute, help out by throwing him a web shooter. The thing that there's one part in that bugged me, and I guess it didn't bug SDA, but it bugged me. In the middle of this fight, where the guy is punching him into school buses, he lands inside of a school bus, and sees the underside of one of the school bus seats covered in gum, and he goes, "Ew, gross." I'm like, no. Wisecracking Spider-Man, sure. But he's fighting for his life. He just found out that his crush's dad is his nemesis. He's being crushed into school buses. He doesn't stop and say, "Ooh, gross," and gum under a chair. I thought, what the fuck is that doing there? It was so weird.
Yeah, no. If he had cracked a joke about the shocker, that'd be fine. But yes. Yeah, the gum thing was just stupid.
Mm-hmm. I was hoping, because I was like, I don't know if at any point Spider-Man had heard that this guy's name was the Shocker.
Right. But
I was hoping, because in the previews and the stuff that I knew about the characters, I was just dying for a moment where Spider-Man's confronting this guy and said, "Do you really think it's a good idea to name yourself after a sexual act?" I was dying for a moment like that, and I thought, it's a PG-13 movie. You can get away with that. That's hilarious. They never did it. They really should have. But anyway.
Somebody asked, is the Shocker in this film? Yes, he is.
Yes.
There's actually two versions.
Yeah, so there's a proto-Shocker. He gets killed, and then Herman Schultz, the actual character, gets the glove, and I guess now he's the Shocker. And we see him get webbed up against a bus. We don't see him get arrested.
No.
So as far as we know, the Tinkerer and the Shocker both get away, and they're still out in the world somewhere, which I'm fine with. So anyway, he fights.
Me too, because that's one of my issues with comic book films is they always kill villains.
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end, but yeah, that's something that I did appreciate about this movie. So he fights this guy, and then he tracks down Toombs to his warehouse hidey hole or whatever. And this is where we have another confrontation scene, and I thought it was really good. So what had happened was he and Ned figured out that because they kept talking about like a vacuum seal and all this other stuff, and he was planning on doing this big heist.
The Tinkerer keeps talking about a vacuum seal when he's talking to the Vulture
about the big one, the big job.
The big one, yes.
And so throughout this movie, every time that Peter's been talking to Happy Hogan's been in the process of clearing everything out of Stark Tower to move to the new upstate facility, which we see in Civil War and Ant-Man and that kind of stuff. And so this culminates in all of this Stark tech and all of this equipment and everything being loaded onto an invisible jet, which I also found hilarious. Like, well, it's in Spider-Man, but it's not in Wonder Woman.
Yes.
But anyway, so this invisible cargo jet is going to take off from downtown New York to fly upstate to the new Avengers facility. And apparently this is a big heist idea that Vulture's team has had for a while, but Vulture wasn't really sure about it because the logistics required a vacuum seal thing and all this other stuff. But now it's going to pay off. Peter Parker's drawn the dots together to say, oh, moving day along with the Vulture and a high flight thing. Oh my God, that's the big deal. He's going to get a bunch of Iron Man equipment, which is even more dangerous in the hands of criminals. I got to stop this. So he confronts the Vulture in his warehouse, tries to talk reason to him a little bit. The Vulture stalls, and then his wings bust through. And I'm like, oh shit. Mm-hmm. This is Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, and his glider versus Spider-Man. I thought they were going to have this big fight, and then the Vulture would get impaled on his own glider wings, just like the Green Goblin did.
Yeah,
I thought they were going to. Now they didn't do that, thankfully, because that would have been dumb. But
one of the issues I have with the movie is that in the comics, the Vulture that's just how he is. He's not wearing metallic wings that do this shit. And I'm with you. I thought we were going to have the fucking impale scene.
Yeah.
Which is an iconic scene in Spider-Man, but that one in my opinion, has to be done just like the books, which is what I liked about Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 1, or let's see, the Spider-Man 1 and the Amazing Spider-Man 2. If they combine a couple of scenes in those, you would have the perfect Spider-Man moment. Mm-hmm. But when those wings came in, I was like, God damn it, please do not. And they didn't. What ends up happening instead is the Vulture uses his wings to cut down the supporting beams, and the roof of this warehouse comes crashing down on Spider-Man.
And this is where I was honestly shocked. I was honestly shocked because I thought, okay, what we've established so far is that this is the father of Liz, he knows this kid is 15. For everything else that he is, he's Spider-Man, but he's a 15-year-old kid, and he just dropped a building on him. And I'm like, okay,
just
this
tried
guy,
to kill him.
Yeah, to kill him, to absolutely kill him. A 15-year-old boy, you're gonna murder. And I'm like, okay, we haven't seen the Vulture do. I mean, when we saw him kill the guy in the beginning of the movie, you could pass it off as a whoops, even though he's callous about it. Even though he's like, well, I guess that happened. It wasn't intentional. He didn't have the intent to kill the guy. He just happened to do it. In this thing, this is brutal as fuck. And I'm like, they have taken this villain to another level at this stage of the game. Because it's not like he sees a guy in a costume and he can sort of like wave away how old he is or whatever else. No, he knows this is a kid.
Yeah.
So he drops a building on him, he puts on his wings and goes to do the big heist. And then Spider-Man has another iconic Spider-Man moment, because there are several instances where Spider-Man is crushed under rubble and he's got to find the strength to lift himself out. I liked this sequence, even if it did have the little flashback to if you need the suit, then you're nothing without it. I thought that was dumb, but
yes, if they had skipped that, it would be perfect.
Yes,
but it was another. Oh, you need the suit. No, just let him do it on his own.
If they'd just shown him looking down at the puddle of water with the mask and half of his face reflecting back, and then he said, "Come on, Spider-Man, you can do it." I mean, I would have been fine. It would have been great. But they had to add that little Tony Stark thing. Shouldn't have been there. It should have been all him and had nothing to do with Tony Stark. But they did that. So, all right. So he lifts himself out of the rubble. And the other thing that kind of bothered me was the suit wasn't really ripped up, that I recall. No. And I always wanted to see the classic Spider-Man suit. I always wanted to see that with rips in it, because Spider-Man always takes combat damage.
Yeah.
That's also part of it, but that never happened. Anyway, so he's in his sweatpants suit. So he gets out of the rubble. He catches up to the Vulture just as he's taking off to go try to take down the plane from Stark Tower. There is overall, the sequence of the Vulture raiding the plane, Spider-Man fighting him and stopping him, that whole thing I liked. I liked all of it. I mean, if taken by itself, it was a decent Spider-Man kind of fight.
It wasn't a bad fight scene. No. I had no problem with that.
Yeah, and when the part where he's as the plane's kind of going down and they're on the roof of the plane and the Vulture's like digging his claws in and chasing after Spider-Man, that was really cool. I mean, that the whole thing, the way they did the Vulture in this made him really threatening, whereas the old man in a green suit in the comic books honestly probably wouldn't have done that well.
The part that does bother me is after the plane crashes and we get to where Spider-Man defeats the Vulture, which he doesn't actually do.
No. Well, he does, but he doesn't kill him.
No, he doesn't do it. The Vulture does it to himself.
Yeah, well, that's true. Okay, legit, yeah.
Fight in this movie, Spider-Man loses. Something else helps him. In the fight with the Shocker around the school buses, the only reason he wins that fight is because Ned fires the web shooter.
Yeah.
And it just happens to have the perfect shot. And then he throws the web shooter over to Peter. And then Peter, if it wasn't for that, Peter's dead. There is no scene in this movie where Spider-Man actually wins a fight. It's that part just, and that in the comic books, he does often lose. He loses and then he goes back and he wins the fight. Like he would lose the first fight to the Vulture, meet up with him again. And so in this, he didn't beat him again. The Vulture tries to steal some of the alien tech, and it blows up.
It's Stark power cores to his suits.
Yes, sorry, but he has the alien tech, which you can't have the two together without him blowing up.
Yeah,
that's another problem I had with this movie. You have these little power things, the alien tech that blows up. Nobody ever dies when these things blow up.
Only one person dies in the whole movie.
Yeah, and that was because he got shot by the gun. And again, I get that in Spider-Man, most people don't die. But
he doesn't kill his bad guys. He doesn't kill his villain, his nemesis either. Right. Spider-Man always captures the guy, saves him, or whatever else. And so again, this part where he's trying to save the guy from his own madness, essentially, is again a throwback to the whole Norman Osborn dynamic of being the dad of his friend. And I get that. I understood why. I'm glad that he, at the last moment, tried to save the guy's life. This is a Spider-Man that I can appreciate. He's not like Batman who kills people. He's a Spider-Man that does, at the end of the day, want to save even the people that are bad.
And again, I have no problem with Spider-Man being good like that. But there's all of these explosions. The boat gets cut in half. Nobody gets killed by it. There's this explosion at the end of the movie. He's fine. No issues at all. When we see him at the very end, where he talks to Scorpion. No, who does he talk to there?
No, it is Scorpion.
Is it Scorpion at the end?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he's all damaged. He's got his arm in a big cast thing, and his face is all fucked up. Yeah.
Michael, there's no injury to Michael Keaton. He's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So anyway,
these are the worst weapons ever. That's all I'm saying.
So Spider-Man saves his Crush's dad, the villain. The day is saved for the most part. I still don't quite understand how Spider-Man crashing that plane saved Happy Hogan's job. That part of the whole thing didn't make a whole lot of sense, because I was like, okay, yes, Spider-Man prevented a bunch of Stark tech from getting out in the world. And as previously established in other Iron Man movies, Stark's technology getting out into the hands of villains is one of his biggest pet peeves, let's say. So I guess in that context, it makes sense that Spider-Man's stopping all that stuff from getting out into the world, given that Tony Stark's big thing is, I don't want to create weapons anymore. I don't want bad people to be using my technology. That makes some sense. The fact that he saved the plane from going into the city also is pretty cool.
Yeah. The issue there, though, is that Happy shouldn't have been fired because somebody stole shit.
I don't understand. Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But
Tony can be a dick, but not like that, and not from what we've seen.
Yeah, so in the aftermath of this, Spider-Man is invited up to the Avengers compound, and Tony Stark says, yeah, kid, you did a good thing, you did the right thing, blah, 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 blah. I think it's time you become an Avenger. And he shows him an even more super Spider-Man suit, which thankfully Spider-Man doesn't get. And Spider-Man's looking at this, and he's like, Tony Stark's like, I got a whole bunch of press people behind there to announce that Spider-Man's the new Avenger. You ready to go? And Spider-Man's like, I'm not ready.
No thanks.
And legit, for the events that have been portrayed in the film, he's definitely not ready to be an Avenger. So he steps back and says, no, I'm just going to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for now. And Tony Stark's like, oh, okay, well, good for you, kid. And he turns back and says, this was a test, wasn't it? And Stark's like, oh, yeah, and you totally passed. But there really was a whole bunch of press people there waiting to hear this announcement. And Pepper Potts suddenly appears, who has been absent from the Marvel films.
Which was I actually got excited to see that because in Age of Ultron, they almost made it seem like Tony and Pepper were going to break up.
Mm-hmm.
I get that Gwyneth might not want to do it anymore, but at least get another actress in there. Don't do that. But then to actually see Gwyneth Paltrow and oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so they decide to replace the announcement of Spider-Man as the new Avenger with, oh, by the way, we're getting married. And here's the ring that Happy's been carrying in his pocket for 8 years. And I was like, okay, that whole sequence worked between the dynamic that's been set up between those characters. It's almost like they were allowed to write that scene because it all really worked for them and that whole dynamic. So then Spider-Man goes back home. We also have the scene where he's back in school. And this happens before he goes off to the compound.
Yes.
He's back at school. He gets a phone call on his phone, and this is Happy showing up to take him upstate to the new facility. And they're all sitting there, all the kids from the academic decathlon. And the teacher says, and by the way, Liz has left now. She and her mom have moved to Oregon because her dad's a supervillain. He's going to be on trial. He doesn't want them there for the trial, etc. And so she's leaving. And so the teacher says, well, since Liz was the team captain, we need a new team captain. I nominate Michelle.
Wait. And here comes the worst part of the whole
This is the worst fucking part of the movie. This made me so fucking mad. So Michelle says, thanks, but my friends call me MJ. And I just wanted to punch through the screen from the 17 rows I was back. I wanted to have like Mr. Fantastic's abilities and just reach out, grab that part of the screen that had her face on it and rip it off the wall. Because I was like, MJ. Fuck you. That is not Mary Jane. First off, her name in the movie is Michelle Jones. She is not a supermodel redhead. She is not the catch of all catches in the world that any nerd would be like, oh my God, you're a goddess. That was the whole point of MJ. She was like, this is like every nerd's dream of sort of overcoming his insecurities and becoming the kind of guy that could get the pretty girl and everything else. Oh yeah, it's sexist and everything. Fuck you. No, MJ is not supposed to be that.
They couldn't even get her fucking name right.
No.
I would have had problems with this if they had named her Mary Jane, but naming her Michelle, fuck you. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. No.
Yeah, trying to do that as some kind of big reveal surprise. I was like, no, that doesn't make me happy. That's not something that means anything to me. You've turned this character into a snarky, sullen, cunt. Social justice cunt. And now you're saying, oh, by the way, she's going to turn into the big love interest because reasons. I'm like, no. But then they just shit in the room, and then we leave to go off to the Avengers compound. That made me angry. Of all the things, I mean, I thought my biggest complaint in the movie to that point was going to be Ned's attitude and his bullshit the whole time. But no, that took.
You can ask Lady Monkey. I was so pissed at that part.
Yeah,
pissed.
Anyway, so after this, Spider-Man goes back home. There's a bag sitting for him on his bed that says, "I think this is yours," and it's got the suit in it. I hope it's the suit minus all the extra stuff, and it's just a suit. It's probably not going to be.
Not. When he pulls it out, you can see the black on it.
Well, that's part of the costume. I don't know if that's part of the tech, but I don't know. Anyway,
it's part of the tech where the wiring goes.
Yeah. So Spider-Man puts on the costume, is feeling all proud, and we got a shot with him in the foreground. In the background, the door's open, and Aunt May's standing there. And honestly, one of the funniest lines in the movie, she goes, "What the fuck?" And before she can get out the last word, which would make probably the movie an R-rated movie or something, they cut to the credits. And
which pissed me off.
I know
so much.
I know. I thought it was hilarious. I didn't like it as far as the lore at all. Trust me, I was not happy that Aunt May finds out that he's Spider-Man this early in his career in the lore.
Yeah, that's by the end of this movie, what is it? I think 5 people know who Spider-Man is. 5 fucking people. Mm-hmm. And one of them is Aunt May. Peter goes to extraordinary lengths throughout the comics to make sure she never finds out.
Right. She's never exposed to it. She's never connected to it, because if people found out that she was Spider-Man's aunt, she would be a target all the time by Dr. Octopus. Whole 9 yards. And I was pissed off at that. The line was funny. The revelation was dumb.
Yeah. Her finding out was fucking moronic.
Yes.
And then we have the after credit scene.
Yeah, so we have 2 after credit scenes. The one at the very end of the credits is not worth sticking around for. If you have not already seen the movie,
around for it. What happened there?
So it comes up with another one of those Captain America training videos.
Oh God.
And it's talking about the virtues of patience. And like, oh yeah, because of the sequel, because of in Infinity War or whatever else. By the way, there's cameos by Captain America in this movie on and off, where he's the subject of these like little promotional training videos for kids kind of stuff, like the Captain America Health Challenge and this, that, and the other thing. And there's the first one that shows up, the PE teacher's like,
yeah, I forgot.
This was funny. This was really funny. The PE teacher's like, yeah, so watch this video now, and I guess he's a war criminal now or something, but I got to show this. Because that's a reference back to Civil War, where now Captain America's on the run after breaking a bunch of people out of the raft. Right. So that was funny.
Yeah, thank you, James. 7 people by the end of this movie knew who Peter was. I forgot the Shocker fights him without his mask on.
Yes.
And Pepper knows who he is as well.
Yes.
So
the after credit sequence that is worth at least sticking around for is Toombs in jail, and he's being walked down the cell. And again, I'm more than glad that the villain did not die. It is too often and too stupid where the villain dies or gets sucked into another dimension or something. No, this is a Spider-Man movie. It's relatively, and I mean relatively to the MCU, down to earth. And so the bad guy survives. And so he's in jail. And as he's walking down the hall in jail, he crosses paths with Max Gargan, who we haven't seen since the Ferry fight. And Max Gargan's got this big new scar on his face because he got knocked off the ship by like a car crashing into him and knocking him off into the water. Mm-hmm. So he's got this big new scar on his face. One of his arms in traction. And he walks up to the Vulture and he says, "Hey, I hear you know who Spider-Man is." And Vulture's like, "If I knew who he was, he'd be dead already." And he walks off. And now the question is, okay, so why didn't the Vulture just say, "Yeah, I know who he is"? We had this argument last night. My theory is that the character as established, A, he's a blue collar guy. B, he has a family that he does care about, even if he is a psychopath. C, Spider-Man did save his daughter's life. And D, when Spider-Man could have just let him die in the fire or what, the explosion or whatever, Spider-Man saved his life, at least as far as the events of the sequence were concerned.
Okay. Now, here's where I disagree with you. This is a guy who tried to kill a 15-year-old boy. Yes,
I'm not saying there aren't problems with it, but I'm trying to rationalize why he wouldn't.
And he also told him in the car that if he ever fucked with him again, he would kill him and everybody he loved.
Mm-hmm.
So you take this character who does not, like 20 minutes later, try to kill Peter.
Yes.
Yet suddenly he's like, nah, man, I don't know who he is. I don't know. Plus, you have the Shocker running around who knows who he is. So there's no reason not to tell him. And that, especially, if I knew who he was, he'd be dead already. Well, if you know who he was and that's what your plan is, then let him kill. Now, here's something that was brought up in chat and something that I absolutely think is what they want to build to, but I don't think they're going to have enough Spider-Man movies to do it.
Okay.
They're building up for a Sinister Six here.
Yes.
You have the Vulture. You have Scorpion, the Tinkerer, Shocker.
Well, Tinkerer's not a Sinister Six guy.
Well, it's not going to be the original Sinister Six.
Well, I mean, the Tinkerer's not an action guy. He's not a field agent. He's a guy in the background. So he could make their gadgets and stuff, but he wouldn't be on. Right. I don't think.
Watch, if they do a Doc Octopus movie, he's going to be the one who makes the arms for him. Watch, I guarantee it.
Yeah, it could be.
But they want. I want a Sinister Six movie more than I can tell you. That was one of the things that at the end of the Amazing Spider-Man 2, where you got Rhino there, is like, sweet. They're definitely building to the Sinister Six. They're going to do it, and then that all fell apart.
Yep.
So it wouldn't be the original Sinister Six, but it would be. That's what it looks like they're building to. And if they did, then there's definitely no reason for Vulture not to tell Scorpion who it is.
Well, but here's the other theory. Here's the alternate theory. Instead of being like some kind of honor among thieves kind of thing, the other thing could be, I don't want to tell Gargan who he is, because if Gargan kills Spider-Man, then I can't get my revenge.
True. And I can see that. Yeah. But this is another reason I have a problem with him knowing who Spider-Man is. It would be much better if he just didn't fucking know.
Right. Yeah, this is one of the problems. At least in the comic books, Norman Osborn had the excuse of the Goblin personality was almost like a secondary one, and when he lost his memory, he couldn't remember who Spider-Man was, and so there was that excuse. And I thought, I mean, when the wings blew up, I was like, okay, so is this where he's going to get amnesia or go into a coma or something?
Right.
Because him going into a coma, that would make a lot more sense. Even if the Shocker had some inkling of who this kid was, at least the main bad guy would not be a factor. But no, he's conscious, he's alive, he remembers everything. Like, okay, they've really set up some really crazy complications here. So there is a bit of ambiguity at the end of the movie as to why the Vulture is keeping it secret. Is he doing it because of honorable-ish reasons? Is he doing it because of selfish reasons? We don't know. And so for that sake, I appreciate the mystery in a way, sort of.
Here's another problem I have is, as far as we know, we're only getting one more Spider-Man movie out of Marvel.
As far as the deal between Sony and Marvel for this continuity, yes. Right now, it could change, but right now, it's only one more movie.
And with that, there's no reason for the build-up to a second Vulture movie. That scene right there is definitely a cliffhanger for a second movie.
He could end up being a supplementary character in some fashion.
Yeah,
in the background.
This is why I think we're leading up to a Sinister Six. His wings being able to break them. I mean, he broke all kinds of concrete with them. It would be an easy way to break them out of jail.
There's not going to be a Sinister Six movie in the MCU.
That's what you say.
No. Well, okay. Barring there being some crazy contract renegotiations, all the Spider-Man stuff reverts back to Sony as of the second Spider-Man film.
Right.
Spider-Man will appear in the Avengers Infinity War movies. He may make, because he's only contracted to do like 4 movies. So Spider-Man 1, 5. So there was Civil War, Spider-Man 1, Infinity War 1, 2, and then Spider-Man 2. After that, Tom Holland's contract goes up. and so does the deal with Marvel to do Spider-Man movies.
But they could do a Sinister Six in the next movie.
I hope not. That would be the most awkward thing. Where would you get the other 3 characters from, and how would you establish them that quickly?
I see they're villains. You don't have to establish them too quickly. Unless you want to do like you did with Vulture, and suddenly he has a daughter that he's fighting for. That fucking sucked. That pissed me off so bad.
Here's the problem. Okay, and this was the problem I was going to have with the original plan they had for a Sinister Six movie over on the Sony side with the Amazing Spider-Man universe. The reason for the Sinister Six coming together is all these guys realize they can't take Spider-Man alone, so they're going to team up. Because they all already had previous histories with fighting Spider-Man. That's the whole reason behind the Sinister Six. If you just shunt in a bunch of villains who don't have any particular history or grudge against Spider-Man, you take away what the Sinister Six was about.
You have no problem with Spider-Man having this super suit.
I didn't say I had no problem with it. No, hold on. I didn't say I had no problem with it. I understood the mechanism they were going for. They didn't execute it well. But again, I'm having to be a pragmatist here in that I have to deal with what they give me. I have to judge it on its own merits in relation to what they have presented. I think this is where you and I differ, is that I have a sort of insulating barrier in my mind at this point between my thoughts about how it should be portrayed versus the comics, and how some concessions have to be made to fit inside the movie universe. Like Iron Man. When Iron Man first came out, I own a copy, an actual copy of the very first appearance of Iron Man, Tales of Suspense, number 39. I read that comic book when I was a little kid. I felt really happy that I got this passed down to me from my relatives. And so when the Iron Man movie came out, I thought, man, I hope they get the origin right, because the origin took place during like Vietnam, Korean War kind of era and stuff, and they shifted the timeline of where it took place, when it took place, obviously, in the events, but they nailed it, and I was so happy in that moment, because I was like, I understand they have to make concessions, but at least they're passionate enough about these characters to get them right in spirit, even if they have to make some changes for the sake of, expediency. And for the most part, in all of the Marvel movies to this point, even though I have problems in every of the movies in regards to some of the characters, I have problems.
Sure.
But in for the most part, the people making these movies care about the characters. The people in charge of setting these movies up care about the timeline. And I really give them all credit in the world, because at the end of the day, I'm seeing my childhood heroes represented on big movie screens, which I never imagined would happen in this way. And that makes me happy in the first place. So when it comes to Spider-Man, I can give some concessions for what they had to work with and how they had to fit it in. I do not agree with how they did it. I do not agree with the execution of it and the point they were trying to get across. If they're trying to do like a coming of age story, they really needed to show a disparity between not having the suit versus having the suit and then having it taken away again. They didn't do that. I saw what they were trying to do, but they didn't do it.
Here's my problem. I absolutely love that they've made Spider-Man and put him on the big screen. That's why the original Spider-Man movie is probably my favorite of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they mostly got it right with the spirit of the character.
Yes.
They fucked up Peter Parker a lot, but Spider-Man was pretty good.
Right.
And the Amazing Spider-Man with Garfield, he did an excellent job as Spider-Man. He was a snarky, sarcastic jackass, which was great. Mm-hmm. Somebody in the chat mentioned this one didn't have very many quips with him as Spider-Man. He didn't make a lot of jokes. He did in the bank.
Yes.
And then he did when he first gets on the ship. But otherwise, he's most of the time just running for his life.
Yeah.
I don't think they got the spirit of the character right here. I think they completely fucked it up. And not just Peter. I don't mind that Peter, they fuck that up all the time. But Spider-Man is such a worthless character in this. The only thing that he gets saved by everyone else. It's never him doing anything. The only time that he actually manages to get anything right is when he saves the people in the Washington Monument.
Yeah.
Every other time, I mean, he's just getting the shit kicked out of him, and he's He's not cracking jokes. He gets beat up. He's there to get beat up.
Yeah, the people who did him or created him for the sake of Civil War did it right. I mean, for the sake of that movie and that sequence, that was Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and then they watered him down for this somehow.
In the chat, the Zero Cool just said, and he was a motor mouth in Civil War. Notice that, Ranting Monkey?
Yes.
I did, and he was fucking awesome in Civil War.
Yes.
And I was actually hoping that they would bring that Spider-Man into this movie, and they didn't. They didn't even get that part right. Which, like I said, there's parts of this movie that are just beautiful. The party scene where he has to leave, the homecoming where he has to leave. Even though I hated the Vulture finding out who he was, that car scene is fucking excellent. It is so just, the tension is horrible.
Yeah.
There's things they got right. But to me, the part that bothers me is I don't believe they represented the character very well.
See, and then I said this earlier, but I kind of wish they had not had the Civil War reveal. I kind of wish they hadn't in there, because you set the expectations to that, and it's a decent expectation because they executed the character, his attitude, his actions, his abilities, the whole thing really well. I mean, he fought the Falcon and the Winter Soldier by himself and basically held his own.
Yeah,
and then he fights the Shocker, and he gets. And the other thing too is, at no point, and I was really pissed off by this, at no point in the course of encountering the Vulture did Spider-Man say, what is with all these guys and these metal wings? Because he fought the fucking Falcon. I mean, it's like, shouldn't he have like, oh gosh, I've gone up against a flying guy before. You're not anything special. I mean, something, but they didn't. And I was like, well.
Yeah, so again, for me, it's all about them not getting the character right. And as bad as, if you really should watch the whole Amazing Spider-Man. Don't watch 2. It sucks so bad. But Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man is fucking awesome. Andrew Garfield did such a good job. The writers did really well with the bullshit he says throughout it. That was nailing it. They got everything else wrong in that movie. But for me, if you get Spider-Man right, I will forgive so much else.
Yeah.
But they made him such a pussy in this. And I'm not talking about Peter. I'm talking about Spider-Man himself. Such a goddamn pussy.
Yeah, like I say, if they hadn't shown a collected, quippy, experienced, and successful Spider-Man in Civil War, and they had made this a learning the ropes movie unto itself, it wouldn't necessarily have been a better movie, but it would have made a lot more sense in his fucking up and learning how to use his powers and everything else. The false expectation that Civil War provides us for what this was, that is a disappointment, I won't deny. But those scenes, man, those individual scenes, it shows me that they at least know the character well enough. They can do scenes like that. They've got to work within the constraints of whatever they were told to do with this thing. I am giving the writers and the director and everything a lot of leeway here, because I've watched too many movies. I've listened to too many commentaries. I've watched too many interviews with people after the fact of movies to think that everything in this movie is the fault of one person or something. Like anything that didn't work is like the director's fault, the writer's fault, or anything else. It is a group effort. It is a team effort between the executives and the people doing the movie. But the things that worked in this movie tell me that the people making it at least knew what the fuck they were doing, and they cared about the character. And that gives me hope for what comes next and how they get to go along with this, since they've already established all this precursor stuff.
Well, this is one of the problems I have. You've mentioned several times Civil War kind of pigeonholed them in certain respects. Civil War did set up Spider-Man, not Peter, as who Spider-Man should be, and we did not see that in this movie at all.
Yeah, I won't deny it. I won't deny it.
The bank scene, which, by the way, the bank scene is missing a part from the trailer, which was actually a good Spider-Man moment where he says, "You're not the real Avengers." The Hulk gives it away. He does say they're not the real Avengers, but the Hulk line is cut.
Is it?
It is. It's missing from the movie, because I was waiting for it. I'm like, where'd that go? There's also a scene where in the trailer where Spidey is swinging next to Iron Man flying, which is not in the movie at all.
I have the story behind it, actually. I found that.
Why is it?
Okay, so this is a story that came out 3 days ago on Games Radar. And it says, Spider-Man, Homecoming's most iconic scene isn't in the movie, and here's why. And it's a very short article, so let's read the whole thing. Spider-Man Homecoming and its many, many trailers is full to the brim with fantastic scenes, but minor spoilers for the movie here, haha. There's one iconic scene from the trailers that didn't make the final cut. The scene in question involves that shot in the trailers of Iron Man and Spider-Man swooping over Queens. It screams, "Take all my money," but unfortunately was MIA in the finished product. Speaking to Screen Crush, director John Watts explained that the deal behind removing one of the coolest shots comes to come out of the MCU in years, and one that arguably sold the movie to a lot of people. Quote, I think what happened was, in the very first trailer, they wanted a shot of Spider-Man and Iron Man flying together, and they were going to use something from the Staten Island ferry scene, but it just didn't look that great. Unquote. Watts, though, had a perfect solution to having Spidey and Iron Man appear together in the same shot. Quote, I think I was like, let's put them in Queens. Let's use that as a backdrop. Because we couldn't just create a whole new shot, so let's just use one of these shots of the subway, put them in there. Okay. Oh, so you just like found like a B-roll stuff and just put them into a shot just as a thing. It wasn't part of the movie. It was never meant to be part of the movie, apparently.
That's false advertising.
Well, let's see. Except, of course, the shot didn't make it into the movie. In fact, Watts forgot about it until presumably he saw the trailer. Don't worry, though. He's as weirded out as you probably are. Quote, I feel a little weird that there's a shot in the trailer that's not in the movie at all, but it's a cool shot. It's funny. I forgot that we did that. That is kooky, but
it is a really cool shot. And to be honest, there's no part in the movie where that would make sense.
Yeah.
But it was such a cool shot. I feel a little lied to by that one. I'm not going to lie.
Especially since Iron Man could fly way faster than Spider-Man can swing. Let's be honest here.
True.
Yeah,
but you can slow down to, you know.
Yeah, true. Yeah, just to go around with him and stuff. But if they're actually going somewhere to do something, he would leave Spider-Man in the dust. But anyway, moving on.
We do need to wrap this up. I have to go out, but I think there were a lot of great parts to this movie, and there's excellent Spider-Man moments.
Yes.
Actually, I have to refer. There's some excellent Peter Parker moments, which is weird for a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
But overall, I just didn't like it because I don't think they got the spirit of the character right.
Okay. Like I said, I have similar complaints to you. I don't have as much vitriol towards it, I suppose.
Yes, I have.
Because,
I do.
Because I've like I said, I've raised my tolerances for shifts in my expectations of certain things because having gone through 13 of these movies now, I guess I've just built up a little bit like, well, as long as I enjoy myself, I'm not going to hate it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I enjoyed Doctor Strange. I still have a lot of problems with it and so on. So I'm only hopeful that now that they've gotten this garbage origin story stuff out of the way, which isn't the old origin story, but is just the new origin story, that we get on with getting on, and that Spider-Man 2 is the Spider-Man movie I have always hoped for. So we'll see.
I hope so. With what they did in Civil War, and some of what they did here, they could make an excellent Spider-Man movie if they get away from the goddamn origin shit.
Yes.
So hopefully they do. And I do want to give them one more area of praise. In the original Spider-Man, the first supervillain he fights is the Vulture.
Yes, this is true.
None of the other movies even mention him.
Yeah,
you do see just a cut of it when they're going through Osborn, and you see all these Sinister Six costumes,
right?
But they never give him the credit because he's not one of the cooler. He's a guy with wings. The actual Vulture in the comics is kind of cheesy.
Yeah,
but I think they did a really good job, and Michael Keaton fucking nailed his performance.
Yes,
but good date night, but. Not a movie I would recommend. If you like Spider-Man, check it out to give your own take on it, but go into it realizing you are not watching the Spider-Man that the 60s. It is a new Spider-Man, and if you can forgive some of the stuff, you might really enjoy it.
And if you're not a hardcore, old, crusty Spider-Man fan like we are, you're probably going to love it. So by all means, go see it.
The people I know who don't know anything about Spider-Man love the movie, so check it out. All right. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. Chat, thank you guys so much for coming. And we'll see you tonight on whose channel are we on tonight?
I believe we're on SDA's. So prepare for a terrorist attack sometime between now and then.
Yeah, right. 9:30 tonight on SDA's channel.
9:30 because she has some other stuff she's doing ahead of time.
Yep. So we'll see you then, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.